Hello, Paul Whitby here from Care to Lead, and in this video I'm just going to talk about the quantity of work that people have to face up to in wards and care homes and how this can affect the quality of the care that they give. The first fairly obvious point is that nursing staff, care staff, professional staff are generally overworked. There's a vast amount of tasks that they have to do, and as soon as they've cleared one, there's another whole load waiting for them. To add to this, on many wards, not all wards, but on many wards, we find that there just aren't sufficient numbers of staff around or people of the right grade. So this just compounds the amount of work that has to be done. In addition, we have to think about the little amount of control that professional staff have over the work that comes in at them. It just keeps on coming, and it's very difficult for them to schedule, arrange, organise their workload. They have to deal with things as they happen. And a final point, and I think this is very important, as particularly important for nurses and care staff on inpatient units and care homes, is that they don't get a break. Well, they do get breaks. They get short breaks for meals and coffee, but largely, if you're working on a ward, then you're working on a ward and you will stay there for most of your shift. Whereas a lot of other disciplines, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, doctors will at least get the chance to walk between wards, go from clinic to clinic, maybe sit in an office for a while doing some preparation. They do get some respite from the constant bombardment of demands from patients, from residents, from their own colleagues. Now, this obviously is going to lead to exhaustion, eventually possibly to burnout, but what other effects does it have on the quality of the care that's offered? There was an interesting study done on this, looking into why it was only the Good Samaritan who offered assistance to the man who was attacked and left by robbers on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, whereas the other two people passed him by. And what the experimenters did was they asked for people to volunteer to come and give a presentation at the psychology department. When they turned up at the psychology department, they were directed across to another building where they were to give their presentation, and they were told one of three things. They were told either, you've got plenty of time, you can get over there in 10 minutes or so, there's no rush. Another group were told that the presentations were about to start, so could they make sure they get there on time? And the third group were told that they were running late and they'd better get there really, really quickly. Now, on the way between the psychology department and the place where they were to give their presentation, they had to pass down an alleyway, and in this alleyway was a man slumped in a doorway, coughing and groaning. This was in December in New York State, so we can imagine it was fairly cold. And the question was, who would stop to offer assistance? And the results were quite striking. Depending on how hurried people were feeling, they were more or less likely to stop and offer assistance. With the people who were in a real rush, only 10% of them offering to help. And you may be impressed by the fact that the people who were giving the presentations were all theology students. So we would imagine that they would be fairly well inclined to be compassionate in the first place. So the moral of this story seems to be fairly clear, that if you want to knock out spontaneous acts of kindness and compassion, then you have to keep people really, really busy. There's a further study that from a field study done on wards by Jill Mabon and colleagues, And they looked at a whole series of wards, looking at the way that the staff behaved towards their patients, and they found that on the wards that were overstretched and poorly led, only on these wards, the staff became quite frustrated by their inability to give really good care to all of their patients. There just weren't enough staff around, there wasn't enough time in the day, and the patients were very, very ill. So what happened was, rather than just giving a uniformly poor quality of care to all their patients, the staff compensated, and they compensated in this way by selecting one or two of the patients who they called their poppets, and they would lavish extra care on these people. Now you can understand why they would do that, because if you work in a place where there's too much to do and not enough time, you can at least go home at the end of your shift thinking, well, I did give decent care to Mrs. Smith, I did bring a smile to Mr. Jones's face, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, lavishing extra time and care on the poppets meant that the rest of the patients had even less time for their care. And some of these other patients, or one of these other patients, remarked that he felt as though he was being handled like a parcel of meat. Hence the title, Poppets and Parcels. So there you are, a good practical demonstration of why if you overstretch people, they can find it difficult to give proper care. The two references to the papers I've been talking about are here. If you want to make a note of them, freeze the video and take them down, but this is entirely optional. Thanks for listening.